What about now? Okay, let's try switching back over. Okay, can you guys hear me all right? For some reason, this headset doesn't actually work. So I can just look like a geek listening to myself, essentially, which is great. Cool. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I guess I can get rid of this headset then because it's just playing me back to myself. Um, cool. Welcome, guys. So I was just saying that YouTube servers were essentially down for the last half an hour or so. So sorry about coming late and then having no sound. Um, but we are all learning here. I assume everyone just thought that I'm an ENFP, so of course I will be 30 minutes late or so, and that would be the case of it. And yeah, the video is delayed. It seems to be about 30 seconds from what I can see it coming through. Maybe even up to a minute or so delayed. So if you're asking questions, I'm going to be a little delayed in getting to them in terms of just this video delay. But I have to choose on my end between good quality and the latency in terms of the delay here. Cool. So I most importantly want to get your questions or anything you want to share. The beauty of this live setup is that we can actually interact and that sort of thing. So, hey, good to see you, man. And so that's the main thing. So in the chat, any like questions, anything you want to share and ask me, that I really want to encourage that. There's a couple things that I made note to talk about, mostly so I had stuff to talk about if there wasn't questions coming in immediately. One thing right off the bat is if you are an ENFP, and this applies to some other personality types as well, I would say, where it's really important to focus on your strengths and to realize that you're not the same as everyone. And of course, this applies in a way to every personality type, right? Like no one is the same as anyone because there's all these different, types that we can be. But there's I feel that society is built by other types. And I don't mean that in a bad way in terms of ENFPs. I mean that in terms of like the way, let's say, the school system is, or the way the typical sort of jobs are. They're not really set up for some of the more intuitive types, which I would say is ENFPs. I'd probably also include like INFPs or INFJs maybe in there as well, right? And so if you are this type, um, then you really like it can be a struggle, right? To feel different, to feel like you don't necessarily fit in or things don't quite work well for you. And the key there that I found is to really embrace your strengths and find work that focuses on that. And whether I mean that as work or as your business, if you're working for yourself, which you guys know I'm a big proponent of, it's finding stuff that can really work with your strengths and using your strengths for that. Um, I was having a conversation the other day with a potential coaching client, and that came up, that conversation of if you are in the right environment as an ENFP, you're unstoppable. Like there's certain abilities and strengths you have that most people cannot compete with. But if you're in the wrong environment, it can be a total nightmare, right? And I was using my own example where when it comes to like coaching, working with people, making videos, I would say I'm very strong in that. Not that my videos are necessarily the best or anything like that, but in one day, I can do a lot more in terms of content and coaching than most people. But you get me to do some accounting, something that would take an ESTJ 20 minutes will take me 3 days to get to. And because I'll be procrastinating it, I'll hate it. It will be the worst thing in the world, right? Um, and so the more we can get out of our own way, the better. Because if we're trying to do those things we don't do well, like admin work, let's say, or trying to force ourselves into a box, then we lose all our energy and we don't have it to do the things we do really well. So this has been my life struggle for sort of 10 years, is more and more trying to optimize and focus on those things that I do well, and get other people to help me do the other things or just eliminate them. Let me look at the chat here. Cool. Gabriel, awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to say, I hope your channel picks up. Me too. We're on the same page in that. An interesting thing with the channel, and someone mentioned about hosting. Yeah, you mentioned hosting videos with other Myers-Briggs type. I've actually been talking to another YouTuber who has. I said to him, I joked, I'm like, dude, you might be my brother from another mother, because we both have these channels where our passion is really helping people. And I love you guys. I love ENFPs. I'm an ENFP, but my passion is not like, I never woke up and was like, my life mission is to help other ENFPs, right? But what happens with YouTube, the way the algorithm works, is that it's very kind of keyword focused, and it tries to pigeonhole the channel. And so YouTube sort of decided that my channel is an ENFP channel. And so if I make a video that's called like, ENFP nothing, it will get 500 views. It doesn't matter if I put ENFP sort of in the title. But if I make a video that is like my life work, the best thing in the world, and I call it like how to have the best relationship and the best life, YouTube won't show it to that many people. And so that's one reason that it sort of led to more of an ENFP focus. And it's interesting because I have a lot of, as I said, like passion for our type and for kind of finding solutions to some of the problems we have, and being our best selves. But I found it interesting in terms of the channel growth, just responding to your original comment in terms of how it works with YouTube in terms of like what content you talk about in that. But yeah, we are planning, me and this other YouTuber, we're actually planning to do a series of videos. I'd love your suggestions on topics we can cover. One of the things we were thinking of starting at is around basically toughness and being resilient and dealing with setbacks. Because it's something that we were talking about where we've seen it, it can be a challenge for a lot of people, dealing with like a little setback comes and they might quit or change direction or something like that. And we've been trying to figure out how we can make some training that will really help in that area. Hey, welcome. Yes, we are finally here. If you're just joining, again, YouTube was down. My apologies. What do you think the sale is a good work for an ENFP person? So I think you're asking if sales, like a job selling, is a good job for ENFPs, which is a really interesting question, actually. So if you're thinking that like in terms of your profession or what kind of work you should be doing as an ENFP, it's really interesting with sales, because I think a lot of ENFPs run into the problem where they get into sales because they're good talkers, right? Sometimes. They're good with bringing enthusiasm and maybe convincing people to do things and connecting with people and making friends and that sort of thing. And the truth is, in the right sales role, ENFPs can be unstoppable. In the wrong sales role, we are miserable and we are hopeless. And if it's cool with you guys, I'll break that down a little bit. because the part of sales we're really good at is like what I would say is the second stage of sales. So I have a good amount of experience in sales because I did like odd jobs, like door to door stuff when I finished university and that. And generally in sales, you have the initial contact part, which is often called outbound sales, right? And that can be cold calling on the phone, it can be door to door sales, it can be other ways of doing it, like through networking or emails, but it's going after people. Like you approach them to get a sales meeting. And I see I've been on a sales job that I hated. And so I'll be curious if it fits into sort of my theory here. So what happens is if we are, so that first part of sales is outbound. The other part is inbound, which is another type of sales, which is when people come to you, right? So that's like if you call up a company and start asking questions about their product, the person you talk to is called an inbound salesperson. Um, ENFPs, we're really good at inbound sales or that second stage where someone else has went door to door or done cold calling. They found the people who are interested and then they set them up with a meeting with you. So as an ENFP, if we sit down in a room with someone, that part of like building trust, having a good conversation, getting to know them and actually care about them, figuring out like the right solution, how to help them, we're unstoppable at that. I don't know if there's another type that's better. But we're very weak, I would say, in the early part of sales, the part that involves a lot of rejection, cold calling, like door-to-door sales, like dealing with the rejection part. I remember I started this newspaper. If you watch my videos and you've heard me talk about my business failure and all that kind of fun low points in my life, that's this business I'm going to talk about. So I had started this business, and with it, I needed to sell advertising. It was basically like a personal development kind of newsletter. Hold on, I'm going to get rid of this thing here. Very uncomfortable. So it was a personal development newsletter, and I needed advertising to basically support it, right? And so I was going door to door. I wrote up a sales package, and I just started going to businesses, knocking on doors, saying, "Do you want to advertise? Do you want to advertise?" And if someone ever tells you that you need money to start a business, now granted, this business did eventually fail, but I would argue you don't, because what I was doing is I was selling advertising in advance. I was saying, I'm going to start this next month. Do you want to sign up early? And generally with something like door-to-door sales, your expected success rate would be 1 in 10 to 1 in 100 people would say yes, somewhere in there. I went to 4 businesses and I got 2 sales. That's unheard of, right? That ability, you talk to 4 people and 2 of them sign up is crazy. But I only talked to 4 the whole day because I was sweating, I was nervous, I was scared. Like I couldn't handle the fear around that rejection. So if I had an ability like some other personality types to go door to door to door to door, if I had to talk to 100 people, I would have been the best salesman in the history of the universe, probably, right? But what makes an ENFP a good salesperson, the ability to talk to people and really empathize, like to connect with them, that same ability makes us much more fearful of rejection and much more sensitive. Because the fact that we care about other people and care what they think is why we have that strength to connect with them. And that's why we're able to sell well. But that same thing holds us back from getting rejected and like cold calling, like call, that sort of environment, right? And so the ideal sales situation for an ENFP is when you have someone else setting up the lead. So you have someone else who like contacts the people or sets them up, somehow basically organizes the meetings for you. Or you're dealing it with inbound sales where someone is coming to you and saying like, hey, I want to hire you, or hey, I'm interested in this product. And then you talk to them. in that kind of a sales role, you can be pretty unstoppable as an ENFP. But if you get stuck in the outbound role, like going after other people, at least my theory is, and I'm open to someone proving me wrong, but my theory is it's a nightmare for ENFPs. All right, let me get back on the chat here. And I apologize for not instantly responding to the chat, but the way my brain works is if I try to do two things, my girlfriend can attest does not work well. So I think ENFPs are the best at sales at products they believe in. Very true, and that's actually something I should have mentioned is a big thing for ENFPs is when we really believe in something and we're passionate, we're great salespeople. If we don't, we're not so hot. And so that plays into it as well, is ideally your sales role as an ENFP is something where you don't have to do the initial contact and you really believe in the product, like it gets you excited. And in that role, you'll be unstoppable. So I got fired from my previous job and I'm struggling to pick a new one because I'm the jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. And it sounds like you're a smart dude. You picked up English just like that. So what I would say that the master, that whole kind of jack of all trades thing, there's arguments for that, for becoming a master of something. But on the other hand, there's a lot of roles where that can be really good. I mean, I look at my own stuff as an entrepreneur, right? I've got, like yesterday, I'm figuring out email marketing systems, right? I'm dealing with how do I quickly set up a website? How do I do this? How do I write like emails or do copywriting or dealing with talking to people? There's many roles where being good, but not necessarily great in a lot of things can give you power. Usually it will be early stage stuff. So if you're looking to actually work for a company, a large, Fortune 500 type business, they probably don't want someone who's good at a lot of things because they have very specific roles, right? They treat their employees often like a production machine, right? You do this one thing and you do it well. So are there startups, or are there other things like companies you can get involved with early where someone who can quickly learn stuff, quickly get up to speed, handle multiple things at once, where someone like you is valued there? That could be really, that would be where I would look at it, somewhere where that ability to do a lot of things would be really valuable to the business. So just your follow-up with that is, should I be building my skills starting now, or should I just go with whatever is available for me? So I continue like my answer in terms of finding positions maybe where you can use that, but also you want to always be doing work. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream, is as an ENFP, doing what you're strong in, like figuring out your individual strengths and then getting even better at them and then using them is really important. So you want to kind of be doing both. Like if you're good at a lot of things and a quick learner, that's a strength in itself, right? I think of the ENFP, and actually I remember I met this woman in Berlin, and this was she worked in nonprofits, but like with disaster relief, and she was basically a superhero. And she was an ENFP, if I remember correctly. This was years back, but if I remember our conversation correctly, she was an ENFP, and basically she was the person where there's an earthquake in Haiti, they drop her in, and she gets everything set up. Like, okay, here we need tents, we need food, we need medical supplies, and that's where she thrived. She thrived under that adrenaline, last minute pace, like it has to happen, let's go, and being able to very quickly learn a lot of things. So it depends how you mean necessarily jack of all trades, right? If it means that you're just not really good at anything, or does it mean that you learn things quick and you like to do a lot of stuff? If that's the case, that can be a really strong asset in itself. Let's see. So, Martin, I like your question. What is the true purpose of an ENFP? Not to be a king, but a powerful high priest, maybe, an advisor, maybe, a leader in a cult. So, what's interesting with an ENFP is, and this is where I have this group of friends from college who are more like your traditional, like they're doctors, lawyers, and not all of them, but they're very, I would say, like in general, they like the power or the concept of power, right? They love your lawyer TV shows and House of Cards and all that. And the interesting thing is an ENFP, at least for me, and please let me know if this is the case, like, do you resonate with this, if this is true for you as well, is I don't really like having power over people, but I don't want anyone to have power over me. So I very much value independence. I value my freedom, but I don't have any desire to control other people. And actually, one of the things I've had to learn in my business is how to give orders and be more the boss, where I'm like, this has to get done, like do this. Not in, being an ass, but just like there's times where employees get confused if you're like, well, what do you think you should do? They're like, just tell me what to do. You're the boss, right? And so for me, I like the things you mentioned, being the high priest, being the advisor, a cult leader. None of that personally appeals to me. There's a personality cult. Maybe I have my YouTube ENFP cult. You guys want to give me all your assets and come live in Prague? But I don't have the appeal of even advising someone in power. Like that has no, like being a vice president or being like close to power. It makes me almost vomit. Like politics is kind of disgusting to me, to be honest. And so, yeah, I would. It's tough to say like the purpose of the ENFP. I think it depends on each of us. I think part of being an ENFP is finding what you really believe in personally and following through on that. So whatever you feel very strong about, unless it's something I disagree with, then follow through on that and like make a change, make something happen. For me, I remember this sounds like a really cheesy marketing story, but it is what it is. It's true, I swear. I can remember being like 10, 12 years old, and I grew up in this town, sort of a suburb of Vancouver, but at the time it was considered its own little town, right? It's like a fishing village. And there'd be lots of small businesses, and they'd sort of open, and often they'd be someone's dream. Like I remember there was an armory store, like someone selling knights armor and swords and stuff. And I remember seeing them and being like, this is cool. And then seeing them close. And I was sad. And I wasn't sad because I couldn't buy a sword. I was sad because this sort of business owner had failed. Like this person was trying to do something. And I've had that ever since. I have that today. Like if I see a business in my neighborhood, when I see businesses struggle that seem to be offering a good service, like there's a wine place that opened across the street from me, and they have very reasonably priced wine. You guys will hate me, but a big glass of wine is $1 US. And during happy hour, it's 50 cents. And the staff is friendly. The place is beautiful, but it's never that busy. And so I go out of my way to stop by there. And rather than buy wine from the grocery store in bottles, I'll buy it there, and they give you like a plastic bottle. Like they do it fresh from a big thing. And that is because I assume there's someone behind that place, and that was sort of their dream. I hope it's not some big corporation that is behind it. So for me, my purpose has always been kind of helping people go after their dreams, and primarily in an entrepreneurial role one way or the other. I think it's amazing when someone goes after like their athletic dream as well. Like I'll watch Rocky or Rudy and get really inspired, but that's not my world. So for me, it's always been helping people kind of get where they want to go and like create what they want, primarily in the entrepreneurial world. But that isn't an ENFP thing. I think the ENFP part of it is like really believing in a cause and like wanting to help others or make change. And in my case, it's in that world, but in other cases, it could be political, it could be related to charities, to food, to the environment. It's like whatever it is for you. Or it could be related to working with people one on one, like helping people in terms of their family or marriages or whatever that is. I would say that's a big purpose of an ENFP in terms of like the purpose side. I think a part of us having a really good life is like the moment. I think we're not people who live to build up assets as much. Like, all right, I'll work for 30 years or 50 years and I'll save it up and I'll have my 401k or RSSPs, RS. I forget what the retirement one in Canada is. I've been gone too long. But whatever that is, we're not about like building up those assets as much as I think we're about like the living in the moment and sort of and the people and the connections. Okay. I think the most difficult thing for us is to concentrate on a goal and thing and do not change what we think about that. Is it true? Because I change every week. It's definitely a challenge. I have a theory. I'm going to go through the chat and then I'll get to this theory. I'm going to write it down. I haven't made a video or anything of this yet, but it's a theory why ENFPs change direction. It builds on my other stuff I've done about like shiny object syndrome. But let me get to that. Nice. No desire for control. Same. Work for 30 years. Same's like death. Now the funny thing is I talk about like I wouldn't want to work and build assets, but at the same time, I love this is technically work for me, right? The way at least the government would clarify it. And I love doing it and I don't plan on sort of stopping it or retiring. So it's an interesting thing. I think that whole do what you love, as cheesy as it might be, is much more important for ENFPs because we are not good at like forcing our way through things. So we can't just be like, I just got to do this work. Just write this essay, get it done. Like it doesn't really work as well for us compared to other types who can sort of buckle down and just get it done. How have you improved how you handle rejections? So two parts to that answer. I am definitely not bulletproof on that. I don't think I think my skin has thickened a little bit, but I'm not immune to sort of dealing with rejection and that side of things. There were two parts of me. So one, in terms of getting better at it, is just, I think, time and experience and pushing yourself in terms of getting rejected on things. And then you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Like you do realize it's not that big of a deal. The other thing that I did in terms of like the sales side is strategically adjusting how I do business. So by setting my business up in a way where I don't have to cold call or deal with rejection in that kind of standard way, it's a way to just eliminate a lot of that from my life. And I know that's not the perfect, like Tony Robbins, like you can do anything, just change your mindset kind of answer. But I can't honestly say that I like rejection now or it's something that I'm super comfortable with. I'm definitely much better with it. At this point, I'm going to write that down as something to maybe reflect on and like look back on in terms of making a video on or talking to other people in terms of how to deal with rejection better. But I think part of it with me is just sort of the more I've done and the more experiences I've had, and just with age, it's got better. And then I've strategically avoided it more, I think. Um, so the question about ENFPs in terms of changing directions, and I promised I would mention this theory. It's not universal, of course, but for a lot of ENFPs, a lot of things in life are easy. Um, and you might be saying, like, what the hell, Dan? But we tend to be fairly quick learners. On average, ENFPs are more intelligent than like the average. Um, and we often like can do things where someone else would have to say for university, right? Say you're in university and you're studying. The ENFP might look like they spend 7 hours procrastinating and then study for 2 hours and get a B on the exam. Whereas someone else might spend 9 hours studying to get a B on that same exam, or spend, 20 hours studying to get that same grade. And I think because things often, like, the things we do well come really easy for us. You might not realize that because you've never been another type, neither have I. But the things that we do really well are unbelievably hard for a lot of other people. And because we do them well, we don't really have as much struggle and hardship early on. So there's people who maybe aren't the most intelligent and they're not quick on their feet. They're not funny. They're not charming. And they have a tougher go. But by the time they turn 25, 35, they've either sort of like doing nothing, or they've developed a work ethic. They've said, I got to work harder. Like, I need to prepare for 5 hours for every meeting I have. I need to study extra hard. I need to like put in that extra time. And a lot of the time, those people with grit who learn, like, they develop a thick skin, they get comfortable with rejection, they get used to putting in a lot of work to get where they want to go. Those people, so those are the people who end up like committing and pushing through what is like the dip. There's a book by Seth Godin called The Dip that I would highly recommend. I talked about it in my video, I think, on shiny object syndrome. If you Google or look up shiny object syndrome in my channel, it's actually the same picture of me for this dream of me with the mountains behind. That was in Spain. So when we get to that hard point, a lot of other people will push through because they've always hit those hard points. Like, they're used to struggling, hitting a wall, having a shitty time, and then having to keep pushing through. Some of us ENFPs, maybe a lot of us, it hasn't been that hard. And what we think is hard, but we're like, oh, I had to spend 3 hours doing that. And someone else is like, I had to spend 10 hours for that, right? 20 hours for that. And so what we think is hard often isn't really hard on an objective way compared to other people. And so when we hit something that's tough, that's where it turns into we'll change direction. So I just want to go back to your exact wording on the question. It's most difficult for us to concentrate on a goal. And I would agree. I think that's one of the biggest struggles of an ENFP is staying focused and kind of going down one track and getting better and better at something. And I think the reason we do that, one, is we do like variety and excitement and newness. So it's not just this theory of mine. There's something nice about new things, right? Where it's like, oh, cool, this is something new I can discover, I can learn about, whatever. But as well as that, when things get a little tough, rather than like saying, okay, I'm going to buckle down and work hard and push through because I want this outcome, we're more likely to say, oh, that looks nice, and change to something else. And we often don't admit that we're quitting or failing and changing. we kind of twist our words and lie to ourselves a little bit and say like, oh yeah, no, that business I was doing, it's, I don't really think it's a good model anymore, so I'm pivoting and I'm trying this new thing. But really, it got hard and we quit. And so I think one way to help with that is set very concrete goals where you can't really BS to yourself, because you commit to doing something for X amount of time and you don't allow yourself to sort of like change direction and move around when it gets tough or when your emotions change or something like that. Going back up, can you do a video about ENFP girl versus boy? No. And the reason I'm saying no, one, I'm not totally sure, although I think she's having a nap. I could get my ENFP girlfriend to join and advise us on the differences. But I don't think I know fully enough on that topic, and also the YouTube American culture right now around men and women being different is just really weird. And YouTube's firing employees who talk about gender differences and stuff like that. And that's scary. So I'm going to avoid that topic if at all possible. Mostly though, because I don't have. If you want to clarify like what parts of that you'd like me to like get into or talk about, I would probably still do it as much as I talk about YouTube being scary now. But yeah, I don't know exactly what I would just say like boy versus girl with it. But if there's more to that, I definitely get into it. One thing I do know is, let's pretend that men and women aren't exactly the same. There are certain traits that are more masculine and certain traits that are more feminine. And one of the things that traditionally is in this, if you different people who teach about this area, like masculine energy and feminine energy, and it's not meant to be that men have to be masculine and women have to be feminine, but it's about more of like a polarity or an energy. Within this world, the masculine energy is meant to be very like decisive. Like, this is where I'm going, I'm doing this, I'm following my course, like very, say, ENTJ style, right? Determined, focused, like quickly making decisions. Feminine is sort of the ever-changing, ever-different kind of flow. Like, it changes how you feel with your thoughts and emotions and body and everything like that. ENFP's natural way of being tends to definitely lean on the feminine side of things. So I'm comfortable enough to say that. So the way, like the traits of an ENFP in terms of changing direction sometimes, in terms of going with our emotions and like the flow is more of a feminine trait, which is interesting, right? Because if you are an ENFP female and you have the right partner, again, this is sort of men and women, feminism. I don't want to get into this rabbit hole of controversy. I need to scroll down to the comments here. Split sound. So in terms of the sound, my normal mic, this thing, for some reason just was not working with the stream. So I'm using the second mic here. I'll try to move it closer and talk a little bit louder. My poor girlfriend's trying to nap. This is, I think, as loud as I can go. Let me double check here though. Testing. Okay. Wait, let's see. Let me do a quick adjustment on the sound if I can too. No, I don't think there's anything else I can do. Sorry. I'll check on that for the next stream though. So back to the ENFP girl and guy is, in theory, if an ENFP girl is very much like an ENFP, like changing with the flow, a lot of that like feminine, some of them I would say at least are feminine traits, being very empathetic, connecting with people, caring, loving, um, then they're going to, oh, I think I know what happened. Okay, glad it's better. Sorry about that. So an ENFP female with a male who is, do you guys, by the way, do you like how I said I'm not going to talk about this? It's going to get me in trouble with YouTube, and now I'm talking about it without even thinking ahead and planning it so I don't get in trouble? Yeah, that's how you get a channel kicked off YouTube. So, by the way, you should like me on Facebook, so if my channel gets kicked off YouTube, I can communicate with you. So, in theory, an ENFP is a more natural female, where for a guy, there's maybe some areas to work on. Like one of the things for me that I had to learn, if we want to get into some dating advice here, I remember when I was like 15 or so, I had a date with this girl, and I was so indecisive. Like this date went like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to do? Well, what do you think we should do? Like, and for the ladies on the call, you know this. If you have a date with a guy, you want the guy to say, here's where we're going, here's when we're going there, here's what we'll like do. Boom, planned out, like decisive. And I was the opposite, right? Well, I don't know, like, what do you feel like? We could do that or whatever it is. And that was something I learned to be decisive. So, you know, fast forward 10 years, and when I went on a date, I had the full date plan. Like, we're going here, then we're going here, and then this is sort of like, it was planned out exactly, and it was very decisive, and it never once backfired. But that wasn't natural for me. That was something I realized because female friends of mine were like, you're an idiot. Girls hate that. You need to be decisive. Whereas the natural sort of empathetic ENFP trait, nice. I'm glad you're backing that up. So the natural ENFP trait of being kind of indecisive and wanting to maybe bring in other people or collaborate on it, not good as the guy. You want to proactively be decisive with it. It's a huge difference with dating. So on the ENFP kind of male versus female, that is one thing I would say to sort of keep in mind. If you are an ENFP guy, when it comes to the dating world, if you're straight and you're dating a girl who's more feminine and you're more masculine, or you want to kind of play those roles, because you can have it the other way, right? Where you get a masculine female and a feminine male, and that's totally fine too, right? But generally, relationships work better when there's a bit of polarity. So it's something to think about. Like, I would advise, as an ENFP, if you're a guy, to ponder that, right? In terms of being more decisive and that kind of thing. And don't try to force yourself into a box. Don't try to be someone you're not. But the little things, like if you have a date, planning where you will go and that kind of thing. Or if you're like at a bar and you're out on a date or you're with friends and you're ordering, like don't spend 10 minutes browsing the cocktail list. Like I like pina coladas as much as the next person, probably more. I love pina coladas, but it's not an attractive sort of, like societally, it's not viewed as an attractive trait to sort of not even know what drink you want for 10 minutes, right? So yeah, that's something I always struggled with, sort of being indecisive, making up my mind. And I found I just had to make an intention of improving that and take steps to do it. Okay, let's see. So I'm looking at the chat, guys. Work with me. Any questions, anything you want to cover? Let's see on my notes here. One thing I would love to hear, whether it's something I can answer now or plan for in the future, is around just other content you'd like to see. Things come up for me like the the shadow side on the ENFP video. If you haven't seen that, I definitely recommend it. That was something that I'd sort of forgotten about. It was a really important insight in my own life. And it actually just came up in a discussion with someone. And then I thought, okay, this is a video. I had forgot about it. So I know there's more content. I have a few things sort of planned or I've thought about. But I would love your suggestions in terms of, the types of content you might want to see, specific things to answer. One thing I would say, I touched on this a little bit before, when I was ranting about YouTube and their algorithm and all that, is YouTube sort of decides, like, if you only watch my ENFP content, YouTube will only show you my ENFP content, and they'll say, okay, this person is that's what they're interested in. And so when you go to your homepage, that's what they will show you. The problem is as much as I love making channels or content for us, it's not where I want the full focus of the channel to be. Like, I never wanted to make like an ENFP channel only. And most of my advice, because I am an ENFP and I'm coming from this perspective, a lot of my advice, like if I make a video on freelancing, having your own business, or on relationships, or on confidence, you're probably going to find it very applicable because they're universal topics, but it's also like I'm coming at it from an ENFP perspective. But more and more, I won't be putting that, like I won't put in the title, how to be confident as an ENFP. The video will just be how to be confident. So it would be amazing for me if you came to the channel from time to time and just watched the other non-ENFP videos and let me know, like, did you find it valuable as well? Was it good and all that? And that sort of thing. Because what I found is I've made some really, what I think are good videos that I think is some like really important concepts. And I don't include like ENFP tagging in them or in the title. And they don't get many views. They might get 100 views. And then I'll make a video that I will say, careers for ENFPs, and it will get 2,000 views right away. And they're both good videos, but there's a big drastic difference. And so I want to make more content that is a little more universal for you without like pigeonholing and saying like, because you're an ENFP, you have to be this way, right? If that makes sense. Gabriel says, I'd like to see a video on the top 5 books an ENFP should read. Cool. Not to do some self-promoting here, but I did actually write a book on ENFPs, which I will be updating within the next 6 months or so. As you probably can guess, as an ENFP, I do not love updating things as much as I love making new things. But yeah, I'm going to be doing that. I will share the link. No man, the future is specific advice. Stick to ENFP. Nice, thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Cool. Nice, thank you. Cool. What else to cover here? One thing I will say, just while I have your attention, if you're actually, I'm curious on 2 questions. If you could share it in the chat. One is where you are from. And the second is how you earn money, basically. So if you have a job, if you're a student, if you have your own business or you work for yourself, as you know, sort of the 3 topics I tend to cover are like personality type, general psychology and confidence, and like entrepreneurship and freelancing. And I'm very curious about like the crossover, because one of my theories is that generally people who are interested in improving themselves and learning more about themselves and psychology and everything like that tend to be more entrepreneurial because they will benefit more from those results. So if you work for yourself, you're more likely to take a course on how to be more productive because you'll get more money directly, rather than if you have a 9 to 5 job for the government. It doesn't really matter if you do better or worse necessarily. Awesome, flood of comments here, cool. Great. So I'm reading your split sound. This sounds like a epic story. So you guys can follow along in the chat as well. I'm presuming, right? This is all public. So if you can't, let me know and I'll read these messages. But so you were ENFP male. You were dating an ENFP female as well, and she thought you didn't give her enough attention, but you thought you did. I think that might be a male-female thing as well. One of my favorite topics since I've been like a teenager has been talking about relationships and dating, but I don't do it a lot on my channel and with my stuff yet. I will in the future. I've always enjoyed, like, when I was a teenager, listening to those talk shows and like radio shows with advice. And I remember hearing something about like typical gender roles, right? Men are more like, once we've declared something, we consider it declared. So the extreme example is a man says, "I love you." And he's like, "Why would I need to say I love you again? I already told you once. I never told you I don't love you anymore. Therefore, you should assume I always love you." Whereas the more typical female side is changing, right? Everything's changing and in the flow, like I was talking about before. So if you don't say I love you every day, or you don't show that attention, then it's assumed that it's changed, rather than as a guy, you're saying like, "Last week I bought you flowers and said I love you. Why would you think I don't love you just because I didn't do it, every day?" So that's an interesting, I guess, dynamic I've heard about a lot before as well. So in terms of, you're asking with my own relationship, which is also an ENFP male and female, we don't have too much. I don't know. She's probably listening and going to argue with me on it, but I don't think we have too much miscommunication in that area. One of the things that does, I think, help with us is I am sort of neck deep in this like personal development and like psychology stuff, which probably makes me annoying as hell sometimes, I'm sure, where she's like, "Shut up, I don't want to coach." I'm very sure of that. But at other times it does help me. Like, I don't think at 25 I could have made it work as well in terms of being aware of my own communications and figuring out, like, okay, this is what my partner needs, therefore I should find a way to sort of be that way or communicate that way. There's an excellent book I would recommend, and full disclosure, I've never actually read the book, so I can break down the theory. The theory is excellent, and there's a book behind it, so you don't really even need to read the book, but it's called The 5 Love Languages. And the premise of it is that we all express and give love differently within these sort of 5 ways. And, oh, you're from Tenerife? I was there last year over Christmas. I spent a month in Tenerife. So the theory is that we have 5 love languages, and basically how we got love as a child is how we give love and how we share love. And it goes into, like, I'll try to remember the 5 off the top of my head. There's spending time with someone, there's giving gifts, there's doing things together, there's doing things for the person. No, I'm thinking of 6, so one of these overlap. But then there's saying things, and then there's touch. So I think 2 of those are in one category, but I believe those are them. And different one of us, like, we have different ways we express love. So you can end up in this relationship where you express love through gifts and through words, but the other person expresses love through touch and through time. And so you're like working really hard and every day like texting like, I love you, you're beautiful, you're the best, and like buying them things, and they're like, this person doesn't love me. And at the same time, they always just want to like spend time with you and like touch you, and you're like, they never buy me gifts, this person doesn't love me. So I found that concept really interesting. And yeah, so yeah, physical touch. So I found that concept really interesting because it changes how you think, not only in that sense of the love, but that other people experience the world differently than you, right? So you need to think, what does my partner need? What does my client need or my friend need? And really take control of your behavior a little bit with it. All right, I'm going to bounce way back up here. Okay, cool. I've read many books about how to set goals and how to plan your steps. It's difficult for planning longer term, for example. How do you plan your steps? Do you have a good technique? Good question. 1 second here. Very good question. What I found works best for me, I've never been able to do very like step-by-step standard goal setting. It hasn't worked well for me. What has worked well just off the top of my head here, obviously, is kind of intentions. I have a video on how to set New Year's resolutions, which was filmed in Tenerife. Actually, you'll probably recognize where I filmed it. But it's about like the intention. So rather than, and this is just for me, I don't know if this really is for everyone, but rather than saying like, I want to lose 11 pounds by this time, it's more thinking, okay, my intent this year is to be real, like my focus is on health and becoming like a machine or whatever it is. And it's more about like setting the overall intention to guide me. So I've done that with years where I'll have a year like this year. I remember the first year I left Canada and I'd been through like a lot of stress the year before. And my intention for that year was to have as much fun as possible and be able to pay for it. Meaning I wasn't going into debt, I wasn't using credit cards or whatever. And if you look at that year, like this was before, like I have footage from it, but I wasn't like YouTubing or anything. I was like driving exotic cars, I went skydiving, I was going on tons of trips. Like at the same time, like I was living in Costa Rica and then going on other trips, and like it was an incredible year. And it was because I had a very clear intention, like make enough money to pay for it, have a ton of fun, which meant if an opportunity to travel came up, I did it as long as I had the money to pay for it. And then in other years, I'd have, you know, my focus would shift. The next year was really more like about business building and being more like long term. And that's when I started writing books and when I started my coaching practice. And really it was not that I set those as really specific goals, but it was more, the whole mindset that year was more focused on business growth and that side of things. And the other thing in terms of goal setting that I would say that works well for me at least is extreme. So like I did a year where, this was almost a decade ago, where I took a year off of drinking. I was like, I will not have any alcohol. And the way I did that was making it extreme. Like I made a promise to everyone. I said, I will move back home, live with my parents if I do this. And I made it very black and white and extreme, and that's very easy for me to do. Another thing I've done is quit eating wheat. for a bunch of reasons, including some minor allergies. But that's an easy diet thing for me to follow. I could never have like 2,500 calories a day, but to just not eat wheat, that's not that hard for me. So very black and white, clear goals or rules tend to work really well for me. And I'd be curious if that's the same with you guys as well. Did anyone ever tell you that you look like Adam Sandler? Yes, I get Adam Sandler and Matthew Fox. If I'm in good shape, I get Matthew Fox more than Adam Sandler, and it depends on the haircut as well. I was once in Argentina, and a group of like 15-year-old girls swarmed me, and they thought because this was when Lost was still on. I think it was like 2010, 9. And yeah, me and my friend got swarmed by a group of teenage girls who were like, Lost, Matthew Fox. All right, let's see. I'm from Texas. Love this self-help stuff. Awesome. I need to visit Texas sooner or later. I hear only good things. Awesome. However, would you pet your dog or cat once and say, okay, that's enough. I don't ever need to pet you again? That's a good point. That would be an awesome like video, just where you have some guy, like very classical masculine man, like he pets the dog. All right, dog, go. Come back next year. You get 1 pet per year. Oh, verbal petting. I like it. The words of affirmation are definitely good. Extreme experiments have worked for me too. Nice. Intermittent fasting. I'm playing around with the intermittent fasting. How do you do it? I'm curious in terms of with your eating. With the extreme goals, I think why it works well for ENFPs is if you watched, like in some of my videos I've talked about this, where that slippery slope where we'll sort of set a goal and then we'll like change it a little bit and we don't acknowledge that we're quitting or changing it because we're kind of justifying it. And this isn't just ENFPs, this is all human beings, right? Where we have emotions first and then we logically justify things we want to do. Like the classic example I've used is like eating chocolate, where we're like, well, this study said chocolate's good for us, right? So I have to eat it. And so that often happens where like we have a feeling and then we change what we want to do because we want to like do that thing because of the feeling. And so I think as an ENFP, we're even more likely to do that because just how we're wired, right? In terms of being more like being F and P. And so having the extreme, like you can't fake that, right? If you say like, I will not drink alcohol or I will do this every day, black and white, I will do it for 1 year. If I don't do it, here's the punishment. You can't really trick yourself out of that. And that's why I think those work quite well. There are definitely people and types that can do like the same thing. They can say, I'm going to eat 100 less calories a day, or I'm going to, go to the gym 3 days a week and that kind of thing. But I think for most people, and I think especially ENFPs, it doesn't work well. So that's why I think the extreme comes in and works really well for us. Nice. Yeah, so Maria's talking about intermittent fasting, which is where there's different ways to do it, but it's basically not eating for most of a day or not eating for a whole day. So it's not like doing a 1 week fast, which is a very ENFP way of dieting, right? I'm just not eating for a week, forget it. But it's taking like a day off of food. And there's been a lot of science backing that up as very healthy things, not just for weight loss, but for like testosterone, or for like just generally longevity, living longer, all this stuff. And I've been looking at it more and more because it's a very ENFP way of dieting, right? Like I just don't eat all day rather than having to think about the details of it all. That would be a good topic. The thing, like with all of us, and it's with ENFPs more than others probably, but we have these tendencies, right? That we need to be a little extreme, or that we get really excited about things, or that. So, like if you've been to my website, you see I talked about like the life design approach, right? Design your life around who you are and your strengths and what you want, and why I think that's so important to do is you can harness whatever these like strengths are for you, right? So if you realize that you get really excited about things for like a month or two, then you tend to lose interest a bit, then set up projects that you can do for a month where you can get something out of it. I've said this before. It's easier for me to write a book, although not this latest book I'm working on, which is becoming a challenge. But in general, in the past, it's been easier for me to write an entire book than to publish a new blog article every week. Because that like blog article is not that exciting for me. Like it's not a great challenging thing, whereas finishing a book in a month is like a very challenging thing to do. So what can you sort of learn about yourself where you can then apply that to how you work? And obviously this is where, as an ENFP, working for yourself can be an advantage, or working with a really cool company that will give you that freedom to work in your strengths rather than trying to just force you to do everything. So as an ENFP, I work best when no one is expecting anything, like cleaning the house. I wait until no one is home and cleaning everything, and then clean everything. As soon as someone expects something, the fun is gone. You translated the 4-hour, like I presume you did it professionally, not just for fun. That's awesome. So you know the book better than anyone. So back to the comment about when people are expecting or aren't expecting anything. That's really interesting. It's something I've been experimenting with and thinking about in terms of that expectation. And I don't know if it's a ENFP thing or an ADHD thing or maybe tied to both. But I have found like productivity, as you may have guessed from the amount of videos I make about productivity, has been a challenge for me, right? It's an area I'm always working to improve to sort of get the most out of myself. And what I've found is that if I'm like, I have to work now, often it does work, where if I really focus and I have my schedule set up, I get work done. But there's also times when I'm maybe not in the best headspace or whatever it is, where having that I must work doesn't like necessarily get me there. But then I'll put on like a Vice documentary or a YouTube thing, and within 2 minutes I pause it and I start working. And I never even watch the thing. But because it was like I didn't have to work, then I wanted to. It's a weird thing that I'm trying to get to the bottom of in terms of how that happens psychologically. How do you spot INFJ females? My standard advice for finding a partner of a certain type is date as many people as you possibly can, and then find out their types eventually. Worst case scenario, you've got to date a lot of people. Nice. Cool. So you guys have been awesome. I think we've got to wrap up now. Just because I had promised people I would meet them for some dinner and such about 20 minutes ago. So again, for those of you who were trying to join at the original start time, my apologies, although it was beyond my control. YouTube servers were just down entirely. I tried multiple computers, multiple connections. It was just their server issue. I'm going to do more of these, so if you have any requests for topics, you can always email me at dan@dreamsaroundtheworld.com, and I'd like to think about more ways to do these. So if you have suggestions of different ways, one thing, I think the technology side of this is a bit tough, but I'll look at trying to do it with a co-host at times as well, to bring in other things, or maybe do like interviews or group discussions or something could be cool. I know, I'm sorry I'm leaving you guys. I'm not leaving you, we're leaving each other until next time. One thing I will mention, because I have to pay my bills eventually, is over the next week or so, I'll be doing a few live webinars. So this won't be through YouTube. If you want to find out about those, hold on, let me, how do I'm going to find the links for these. I'll be doing a few webinars primarily for freelancers, coaches, and consultants, for those wanting to become. So if you are already like a freelancer, sorry, I'm trying to multitask here, which I don't do well, and get this link. If you are a freelancer or basically becoming one, then this webinar covers a lot about sales, about getting clients, and that side of things. And the theme is around becoming, it's not that you have to become location independent in terms of like traveling or going all over the world, but it's to build a business that will give you that freedom. So like in my case, I live in Prague now. I don't bounce around the world all the time, but I spent, like last year, I spent a month in Tenerife, Spain over Christmas to get the sunshine. Next year, I'll be in New York and Mexico for a month each. Also, if anyone's in New York or Mexico, do write me. And so the webinar is all training about that. I'm going to try to find a link for this here, if I can. Yes. So I'll share the URL here. It's just dreamsaroundtheworld.com/free cookies. If you do want to join us for one of the webinars. The webinar will be a bit different than this. It will be more structured. So I have training all planned out that I'll go through. But there's also interaction and Q&A and all that stuff. So if you are interested in that part of what I'm passionate about in terms of entrepreneurship and that, I definitely encourage you to come out. Nice. 8 months in Budapest. You know what's funny is I live in Prague. You can see I have my shiny object syndrome, right? I'm talking about something, I'm like, chat, okay. I live in Prague, which is about 7-8 hours north of Budapest. I almost lived in Budapest instead of Prague, and they're very like similar cities, and I've never actually been now to Budapest. So I think because I'm trying to save like really great cities to visit later, so I don't like, you know, run out of easy places to visit if I need a trip. Cool. I am going into tired Dan rambling mode, so we're going to cut it off here. It has been great to have you guys with me. I appreciate your questions. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to doing this again. And that's it. You're awesome. Thank you for your support, and I can't wait to see you soon.